So we have a little bit of a technical difficulty because we only have one mic. Actually, we always stand very close to each other at all times. Thank you, thank you, thank you, each and every one of you who are here. It is for me the greatest pleasure to be back in my hometown and to introduce my beloved husband to so many friends who have been friends for so very long. It's unbelievable that you would love me for 45 years. And I'm all of 47, Barbara. So the scriptures teach us he who saves a life in time saves the world. My husband Hassan helped me save the life of a young girl who was mortally ill and couldn't get a visa to come to the United States. Eventually, we got her here, and she was taken care of at Minneapolis Children's Hospital by the greatest heart surgeons and doctors in America. That memory stuck with me forever and ever. Flash forward, here we are, a young married couple.
That's her story, and she's sticking to
I'm
it.
sticking to it. I want to begin by thanking everyone at Lifetime, not just for this fabulous evening. And I'm not going to mention any names, but Tracy, Jody, everyone at Lifetime who has been kind and thoughtful with me and the people on my team for the past 20 years plus. It's been a heck of a ride, and it's been our honor to be on that ride with a singular corporation with clarity of mission, determination, ferocity of implementation through thick and thin. Bahram, you may not be here in person, but I know you're here in spirit. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for putting together this amazing team and these amazing accomplishments. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge my darling friend Emily, who's the most precious. I call her Saint Emily because she can put up with us all and not kill us, which is difficult at times. But all my friends, all of you, I see you. I'm grateful to you. Kathleen Blatz gets the award for the oldest friend. I mean, the friend of the longest duration. And she wove her way through the Minnesota Supreme Court. And at the end of all these years, here we are again celebrating each other. But every one of you who has loved for us and cared for us and made my dreams come true. I also want to acknowledge that this is the first of our book events that we have one of our 5 children and 2 of our 8 grandchildren present with us. So Roz, Miss Audrey, Joe, this is a very, very special book event for Hassan June and for me. The story of Hassan's life you have to read it because it's unbelievable even when he tells of it. But I hope that you enjoy the book, and I hope that it becomes an impetus to help us in the cause of criminal justice reform. Way too many Americans are locked up, and way too many of them have to spend the rest of their lives bearing the scars of that event. When Hassan first wrote to me from prison, he wrote, I hope I'm not stealing your line.
You go right ahead. Not the first time, it won't be the last.
Dostoevsky says, we will judge a society by the way it treats its prisoners. On that account, we as Americans with 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners, come up short. And it is a moral imperative for all of us, because I will leave you with this thought, that I believe in the bottom of my heart that every sinner has a future and every saint has a past. So with that,
And she's not quite clear whether I'm the sinner or the saint.
yeah, there, yes, you are. Yes, you are. So with that, I turn you over to the author, Hassan Nemazee, who's now irritated because his headpiece isn't working, but
Okay.
here we
Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm humbled and deeply gratified by the fact that Nazee has so many friends here in Minneapolis, and you're all here for her. Thank you. Emily, Bahram, who's not here, thank you very much for hosting this event, and all the people at Lifetime. I do know that you have something to do, and that's to get Bahram to read my book, because I understand that Bahram doesn't read books. So maybe you'll read it to him at night, give him a little bit of it. This book might never have been published if it had not been for Nazee. She gave me the courage and the support to take what was an unfinished manuscript, which I wrote in prison. Somebody asked me tonight, how long did it take you to write this book? I wrote the book in 90 days, but I wrote it in prison. I had no computer, no access to the internet, no access to files, and I just simply sat down and wrote every day for a minimum of 2 hours and a maximum of 4. And I wrote in longhand, and I hired somebody in prison, and in prison you can hire people. You pay in prison currency. In Texarkana, where I was, the prison currency was stamps. When I was in Otisville, the prison currency was mackerel, believe it or not. So the book was written in prison, it was typed and then sent out, put on a Word document, and stayed for about 8 or 9 years until I came out. And then we hired an editor and worked on putting this book from what was an unwieldy manuscript into the book that it is today. And I know some of you have already bought it and some of you have read it, and I hope you all have an opportunity to read it and find it of interest, because it's the arc of not only my life, but my family's life. And it starts with my grandfather leaving Iran in the 1870s, going to India, then China, and then my father leaving China at the time of the Second World War, coming to the United States, as he put it, as a diplomat by convenience. Because in order to get out of occupied China, which was occupied at the time by the Japanese, he came to the United States as an accredited diplomat at the Iranian embassy. He then came to the United States, married my mother. He was a lifelong bachelor who got married at the age of 53, had me at the age of 54. And I grew up in Washington, D.C., and never went back to Iran until I was 14 for the first time for a summer holiday. And my father, who had an extraordinary life in business in the Far East and in the United States, made his money in shipping and then in textiles, in cement, and in sugar in Iran, and then decided to devote the bulk of his fortune to charitable causes. And he built the first modern hospital, not only in Iran, but the most modern hospital in the Middle East, which was inaugurated in the early 1950s. He built a nursing school, which was the first nursing school, again, in the Middle East. He brought all the doctors from the United States to train Iranian physicians at the medical school, which he helped establish. And he had the foresight to determine that you could not have a modern hospital without clean water. And so he built and endowed the first piped water system in the country, which was built in Shiraz. And He unfortunately passed away when I was 22. And as a consequence, when I finished university, I decided to come back to Iran and lived in Iran for just a brief period, 1972 to 1978, at the time of the revolution. But it was an extraordinarily vibrant and interesting time. I had the opportunity of being in business with companies like what was the predecessor of JP Morgan, was Morgan Guaranty Trust, American International Group, which is AIG, and a variety of other American and British companies. It was an extraordinary time to be young and vibrant and open to all of the opportunities of life in Iran. Nobody foresaw what was going to happen in 1978. And I left Iran on what I thought was going to be a 2-week business trip, which has turned out to be 45 years of exile. Everything that we had in Iran was confiscated, and I have never been back to Iran from that point. My story then takes place in the United States as I go through a period of my business achievements, my civic achievements, and my political involvement. I got involved in politics in the United States in the 1990s with the Clintons, and worked probably on every major Democratic political campaign, both for president and for the Senate. I had gotten involved with bank lending. I did exactly the same thing as former President Trump did in terms of inflating my assets. I ended up in prison, and we don't know what's going to happen to him as a consequence, but he is running for president today. I, on the other hand, as a resident of Florida, cannot vote for him or for Kamala Harris. So there's a bit of an irony in this. As Nazee says, we have far too many people incarcerated in the United States. And until and unless you find yourself in the crosshairs of the government, you don't know what dealing with the American criminal justice system is. It's not to say that what I did was not a crime and that what I did not deserve punishment. What I will say is it did not deserve the length of time that I served. It did not deserve the collateral damage that is done. And I'm one of the lucky ones because I came out, and during the time that I was in, somebody asked me, how did you and Nazee, come together? Well, Nazee, when I was involved in my political activities, I had founded an organization called the Iran-American Political Action Committee. And we had members of the board from the East Coast, from the West Coast, but nobody in between. And I had met Nazee. I found her to be extremely intelligent and full of vigor. And I asked her to go on the board. And fast forward to the time that I am arrested and then subject to sentencing, my family sent out notices to 200 people, one of which was Nazee, who all wrote letters on my behalf to the court for leniency. The letter that the judge read into the record was Nazee's letter, which would come as no surprise to those of you in this room. So, fast forward to 8 years later. I've been in prison for 8 years. And the young man that I had hired as the political director of that organization came to see me. And I said, who's still on the board? And he rattles off a list of names, one of which was Nazee. And I said, I never wrote her to thank her for the letters she wrote. So will you do me a favor when you get back to Washington tonight? Please send me her address because I'd like to write her a letter. So I sort of sheepishly wrote a letter starting, Dear Nazee, I have been remiss. And, as a consequence, she wrote me back, and then I wrote her back, and the letters went back and forth for a month or so, and then she asked, do you have access to email? I said, yes. So we started emailing back and forth. Then she said, can I call you? I said, no, you can't call me, but I can call you. And we started talking. And she then said, can I come and visit you? And I said, I would be delighted if you came to see me. And so she started coming to visit me. Brian, who is here tonight, flew her from Minneapolis or California or wherever she was to Cumberland, Maryland, which was, out in the middle of nowhere, Maryland, into a small little private airfield, municipal airfield, that you could only fly into during daylight hours because it didn't have facilities to come into at night. And she would come to see me, and when she went to Washington on her political activities, she would come to see me as well. And then one thing led to another, and when I came out of prison, I moved in to live with her in the apartment that Martha decorated and put together in a matter of a month. And here we are. So, my story ended up having an unexpected happy ending. And the title of my book, which is Persia, Politics, and Prison, A Life in Three Parts, should really be Persia, Politics, and Prison, A Life in Four Parts. Because the fourth part is the happiest part with Nazee at the moment. So, thank you all. Thank you all for being here tonight. With your permission, I'm going to read a very, very short section from the book. And I hope you all buy the book. I hope you all read the book. And Emily, you make sure that he reads the book. So, twice in my life, I've been forced to leave a home I'd never see again, taking only what I could carry. Both times, I lost nearly everything. The first time was in the early days of the Iranian Revolution, December of 1978, when my then wife Sheila and I boarded an Air France flight to Paris. Carrying 2 suitcases each, we slipped out of the country with hardly a moment to spare, leaving behind a beautiful house in a small village on the outskirts of Tehran, along with friends and family, horses and dogs, and dozens of priceless family heirlooms. I was certain that we would soon return to Iran and our home. I was wrong. The second time was in August of 2010, when I walked out of our 17-room duplex on Park Avenue in New York to surrender myself to federal custody in Texas. This time, I knew there would be no going back. Strangely, I remember more about the first departure than the second. As our plane took off from Tehran and rose over the city, I was angry, deeply disturbed by the situation on the ground below, and concerned for friends and family we'd left behind. But I was also young and naive enough to believe that only good things awaited me. Furthermore, I had done nothing to bring about the events in Iran. Later, I'd come to realize that I did share a kind of collective responsibility for the revolution. But at the moment, I considered myself, like millions of Iranians, an innocent victim of history. The second departure was a calmer and more personal event. I was not angry, nor was I naive. I was resigned, numb, and despondent. I was also 60, not 29, and I was unmistakably, personally, to blame. My forced exile was of my own making. Thank you very much. Buy the book. I'm here to sign the copies for you with pleasure. Thank you.